As I explained in the previous episode on the Royal Hungarian Air Force, when Second Army was defeated at the River Don, its air group was also wiped out, although most of the Air Force personnel broke out of encirclement and retreated with the ground units. These men continued to serve at the front in the newly redesignated 102nd Air Force Brigade, which soon had one fighter group with 2 squadrons of Me-109 G2s and one reconnaissance group with 1 squadron of Ju-88s and another squadron of Focke-Wulf 189s. It also included a dive bomber squadron with Ju-87 Stukas and a fast bomber squadron with Ju-88s. These units were subordinated to Luftflotte 4 and participated in the Kursk and Kharkov offensives, but by November 1943, they were almost depleted, so they were sent back to Hungary for rest and refitting. During this period, the fast bombers flew more than 1,000 sorties, while the fighters claimed around 70 kills while losing most of their planes. Back home, the Air Force now had 2 brigades, 1st and 2nd, along with a training brigade. 1st Brigade had 1 fighter, 2 bomber, 1 long-range and 1 short-range reconnaissance group, while 2nd Brigade included 2 fighter, 1 bomber and 1 short-range reconnaissance group. There was also a separate paratrooper group with its own transport planes. The great problem was obsolescence of equipment, as the Hejja II fighter was rapidly becoming outdated, while the Ca-135 bombers also had several issues. Modern replacements were needed, but thankfully the 1941 agreement signed with Germany was finally bearing fruit. The Hungarian wagon and machine factory started delivering the first domestically produced Me-109 G2 fighters. 59 in 1943 stayed in Hungary, while 39 went to the Luftwaffe as per the agreement. While the Danube aircraft factory produced the first Me-210 Ca-1 and C-1 fast bombers, although the first such unit was only set up in early 1944. 159 stayed in Hungary, while 108 were sent to the Luftwaffe. Also in 1943, 86 Hejja II fighters were delivered, followed by another 105 the next year, although by that time they were relegated to a training role. 26 Ju-52 transports were also manufactured, 4 of which were sent to the Luftwaffe, the rest served in the RHAF, which at the end of 1943 had 25,000 men and 392 combat aircraft. These were organized into 6 reconnaissance, 13 fighter, and 10 bomber squadrons. A much larger emphasis was now placed on fighters. The German occupation of Hungary did not directly change the Air Force, but Allied bombings soon began, as the previous secret agreement between Hungary and the Western Allies lost its relevance. Major General Bánfalvi assumed command of the Air Force, which now included the Home Air Command, with 1 fighter, 1 night fighter, and 1 transport group. Apart from these units, the 101st and 102nd Independent Brigades were also in the roster, each with fighter, bomber, and reconnaissance groups, but only the 101st Fighter Group was immediately available for defense purposes, as the other units were busy at the front or with training and refitting. This fighter group was soon expanded with a 3rd squadron, then another 3 were added, forming the 101st Fighter Regiment. Meanwhile, most of the 102nd Brigade remained at the front, with its 2 squadrons of Me-109 fighters, 2 squadrons of Me-210 fast bombers, and 2 squadrons of Stuka dive bombers, the latter of which soon converted to the Focke-Wulf FW-190 fighter bombers. This unit operated under German command after the Romanian capitulation. In mid-1944, many air battles took place over Hungary, in which a handful of Hungarian and German pilots tried to stem the tide, unsuccessfully. Massive formations of American and British bombers, B-24 Liberators, Lancasters, and various other types, were escorted by hundreds of P-38 Lightning and P-51 Mustang fighters, making it almost impossible to even disrupt these incoming waves, let alone beat them back. All major cities were bombed, causing enormous damage to infrastructure, manufacturing facilities, and residential districts. Just to illustrate the situation, even when the 101st Fighter Regiment was available in its entirety, which rarely happened, only about 40 Hungarian fighters could be sent up to face hundreds and hundreds of Allied bombers and their escorts. They could sometimes rely on assistance from about 24 Hungarian fast bombers and occasionally around 70 German fighters stationed in Austria near Vienna, but cooperation between the two air forces was less than perfect. The RHAF fought well, downing dozens of American and British planes, but it was gradually overwhelmed, especially when the Allies switched to bombing airfields and hangars along with manufacturing plants. Most of the time, these bombings could not be prevented, although on some occasions Allied formations were successfully dispersed, which resulted in the bombing of smaller towns and even villages as Allied crewmen tried to get rid of their load before attempting a crash landing. Interestingly, captured Allied airmen were treated well by the authorities. Lynching by the local residents was prevented, partly because Horthy's regime was still trying to maintain some semblance of cooperation with the Western Allies, but not with the Soviets, which they deemed the main enemy. By December, the battle was mostly over. The outcome could no longer be questioned, even though the production of Me-109 G-14 fighters continued in the cellars of the Kőbánya brewery, attaining one fighter per day. The facility soon had to be evacuated, ending production for good. The remaining units retreated to Western Hungary, and since both brigades had suffered serious losses, one last major reorganization was ordered. The 102nd was upgraded to a divisional-size command. It now included the 101st Fighter Regiment with 9 squadrons, the Fast Bomber Group with 2 squadrons, and the sole remaining fighter bomber squadron. In March 1945, all units retreated to Austria, along with all family members who followed them in large convoys, organized by the commanding officers. This was done to prevent their Soviet capture, which did not promise anything good. They continued to fight, flying sorties every day, against overwhelming odds, but in early May, all remaining aircraft were burned and the units surrendered to American troops near the city of Linz. According to official figures, between April 1944 and May 1945, the RHAF shot down 110 US AAF bombers and 56 US AAF fighters, along with 218 Soviet fighters. The top ace claimed 34 kills, but we should also mention that in the process, most aircraft were lost and replacements were scarce. By the end of the war, the Royal Hungarian Air Force practically ceased to exist. Because of this fact, we cannot say that the overall balance is positive. However, we can definitely say that against overwhelming odds, the RHAF performed well, especially its Puma fighter regiment, that's still well known even today. It's not a coincidence that the only remaining fighter unit in Hungary bears the same name and logo. Its resistance and heroic fight could not influence the outcome of the war, but its members certainly deserve respect, which unfortunately they did not enjoy in post-war Hungary. The country's new communist regime treated them as suspicious, hostile elements, enemies of the new order. They hunted down all those who had served in the war, sending many of them to concentration camps or to prison. But this is another tragic period in the history of Eastern Europe.